Hey guys, I'm not feeling well today, so you get this kind of lecture. So if you take out your chapter 22 and 23 reading guide, we're going to be starting on, this is slide 13, and we are at number 16 on your reading guide. So basically, if you remember from yesterday, we talked about economic development. These are some components of more sustainable economic development. Okay, more sustainable economic development. Let me flip this. All right, so if you look at maybe what a community that has taken environmental philosophy as to its own, it says list some components for a more environmentally sustainable economic development. Here are the ones I want you to write down. Are they not on here? Let's do water conservation. Water conservation. Waste prevention and recycling. So this one, and you can add and waste prevention. Renewable energy, is that on there? That would be this and this. You could just call it renewable energy. And then I want you to write this. I want you to write emphasizes quality over quantity. It's kind of a good rule for life, to be honest. Okay, so that's number 16. The next slide is number 17, which I'm not going to make you write down, but oftentimes people take this class and ask me, like, what can I do with this? Hey, I kind of like some of this stuff. What can I do with it? So here's some ideas if you are interested in sustainable business and careers, where you might be headed. All right. So now we kind of move on to urbanization. So we're on number 18. Okay, so if we're going to define urbanization, you're talking about the growth of both urban areas and suburban areas. So currently, 52% of the world's people live in urban areas. So we're talking about cities. And when you look at urbanization, you look at the percent of people in a country living in those areas. So then urban growth goes along with that. It's a rate, kind of like what it sounds like. So it's the rate of increase of these urban populations increasing. So they can grow by natural increase, which you guys would tell me is births, or by immigration. So there are times that for various reasons, maybe it's poverty, maybe it's lack of land for growing food, famine, war, religious, political reasons, that they're pushed from rural areas to urban areas. And there's also times that people are pulled back to rural areas. Jobs, housing, education, entertainment. So the number 19 asks about some trends that we're seeing in world population growth when you're talking about urban areas. So here they are. And again, I'm going to go quick so that you can pause if you need to, just like Mr. Anderson. So the first trend that we're seeing is that from 1850 to 2012, we had a 2 to 5% increase in the world's populations living in urban areas. If you remember from the previous slide, I said 52% total live in urban areas. By 2050, we think that's going to be somewhere around 67%. If you watched the video last night, you also noticed that the urban area size is mushrooming. We have these mega cities, which are 10 million or more. We have these hyper cities, which are 20 million or more. Tokyo, which is where I just looked, it's where the 2020 Olympics are, has 37.1 million people. That's bigger than the entirety of Canada. That's crazy. Because we are already developed, we're seeing that growth slower in developed countries because these cities are already established. And we're seeing poverty, which is kind of traditionally been confined to rural areas shift to urban areas as well. We're going to talk about slums. We're going to talk about shanty towns in a minute. Okay, so top right, you're looking at Shanghai, China. That middle picture is kind of what we picture as suburbia. That's Phoenix, Arizona. And then the bottom is an example of what a rural community still looks like. That's Malawi in Africa. Okay, so that should have answered your trends question. Remember those mega cities were 10 million or more people? These are our mega cities worldwide. Okay, so in the US, we've got New York City and LA. You got quite a few in Asia. If you look at sub-Saharan Africa, not even Cape Town fits that. There is a cool video that you can head to watch some growth, but we're not going to watch it today. So I do want you to flip to number 20. Number 20 is asking phases of urban growth in the U.S. So that was global. Let's talk U.S. and let's talk U.S. between 1800 and basically now. So one trend we're seeing is people moving from rural areas into the city. Okay, urbanization. So in 2012, 71% of Americans lived in those urban areas. However, that includes us, like Brookfield, which is considered a suburb of Milwaukee, right? Like we're not the actual city of Milwaukee. And so another trend we're seeing is urban sprawl, or the movement from these like downtown centers to these surrounding suburbs and smaller cities. So that 71% number I gave you, excuse me, half of that is actually suburban. And then the other trend we see is from north and east to south and west, because that's where the land is. That's where the land was. So if you watched the video last night, you saw this as well, but this is Las Vegas urban growth. The left is 1973, the right is 2009. Now the green area is kind of deceiving. We have more irrigation, we can have more lawns, we can have golf courses. So it's not necessarily creating really high quality green space like you would imagine. So let's talk about urban sprawl, because I kind of mentioned that. That's the video I wanted you to watch. It's what's the video of? It's Madison developing over a long period of time. Okay, so urban sprawl is low density development. So like houses that aren't close together. Think about it like you have a yard, most of you, at the edges of cities and towns. What are we usually eliminating? We're usually eliminating agriculture, which, good or bad, and then some wild area as well. So some factors that have promoted that, and I would list all of them. I listed all of them for 21. We have the land. If we have the land, people are going to move. Our gas doesn't cost much. Gasoline is not full cost pricing like we talked about yesterday. It's a subsidized industry. It's relatively inexpensive. We have I just filed my taxes. We have tax laws that encourage us to own homes rather than live in high density housing like apartments. We have zoning laws that are zoned for residential areas. It's preference. It's quiet in the suburbs. People like the green space. People like the in-between the rural and the urban. People like the convenience of a Target nearby, but want a yard. People like me. Like, I enjoy it too. And then we have public schools that were built more recently because people settle more recently, and there tends to be lower crime rates. So I would actually write all of those down. I think they're all pretty important. So what's the problem? Go, baby, go. There it is. If I put a mark by it, do I have a highlighter? That would be rad. There we go. We're getting rid of cropland, which means a lot of times we have to find it somewhere else. No. Habitat fragmentation. We're losing habitats for wildlife, which decreases biodiversity. Increased runoff and flooding. Pollution of water. Because we're traveling a lot more to get places, we're increasing energy use, which means that we're increasing emissions. And then as you have these people leaving, this urban blight, which is what Mr. Anderson talked about, you see this decline economically of downtown, and you see employment levels rise. Okay. So that was number 22. People, we're like halfway through. This is going to be great. So when you're talking about urbanization, we do have advantages to that when you're talking about cities growing. This is number 23. Do I have a blank page on the back? You might want to throw this on the very back. There's not a ton, there's not a ton of room. So advantages economically, how about that? Advantages economically to urbanization. Some of this we kind of talked about last unit. So these cities are centers of human culture. Think about human cultural diversity. There are jobs there. When a lot of brains get together, you have innovation oftentimes. They're centers of education. We also talked about as cities developed, we have better access to healthcare and family planning. So you have lower infant mortality rate, you have lower total fertility rate because there's options for women. There's education about family planning. You also have a longer lifespan. So that's economic advantages. There are actually environmental advantages to cities too. There's actually quite a bit. Makes recycling a realistic thing because of the high concentration of recyclable materials. We're not driving around in rural wherever picking up cans. You've got a lot in the area and it makes recycling more economically feasible and therefore environmentally helpful. We keep that land outside of urban areas preserved. There's more opportunities for mass transportation and walking and bikes. If you've ever driven around Madison, it's a totally walkable city. Or New York City, which is kind of an extreme of that, has a very low carbon dioxide concentration per capita, per person, because everybody walks or they take mass transit. The subway is huge. Oh, I want you to write more, all right? I want you to write that. Oh, we already have that. Apartments and office buildings. I can write this. Black. Apartments and office buildings require less energy per person. Less energy per person. And that's high density housing, which also helps preserve that biodiversity. So how about some disadvantages? This is also number 23. So this is why I want you to put it on the back. Whoa, go. Okay. So in terms of ecological footprint, which is how many Earths would need to be available if people were using the way we were using, it's pretty big. Urban areas consume 75% of global resources and only use 3% of land area. We don't have a lot of vegetation. Vegetation absorbs pollution, prevents soil erosion. It's a carbon reservoir, increases oxygen, shade. We have areas with water problems because of the amount of concrete. And we have a concentration of pollution. You have all this, think about like smog in LA. Okay. There's a couple more, but I'm running close on my time. So this is it for 23. We'll come back to 24 on the next video.